Our guest speaker, Patrick Crabbe, who's the Director of Mass Timber at Bird Construction, will be presenting a presentation on propelling Canada's mass timber industry. Patrick joined Bird in 2018 and has been a key contributor to the advancement of Mass Timber Construction Centre of Excellence there, which is a key strategic initiative of Bird. Patrick, welcome, and looking forward to hear what you have to say.
Good morning, everyone. Audio sounds great. I'm a walker and talker. Anyone on their phone, I'm going to be picking on you. Okay, this is a really important topic. Yeah, don't be scared if I blurt out and ask you a question. It's just kind of what I do. But look, this is a new presentation. This is content that I've never really presented on before. I would say that this past year has been somewhat transformative. I've had the opportunity, the privilege to be a part of many different groups, both on kind of the federal and provincial government side, as well as within mass timber manufacturing and the design, construction, and engineering industry. And that's kind of been a product of this, is that I feel that we're kind of on the precipice of an explosion. And there are certain ways that we can handle this demand, and there are certain messages that we can be sending to industry that don't inhibit our growth and our success. So based on, I guess, this diverse experience just over this past year, I'm going to stick my neck out here and kind of give what I think are really vital recommendations within 3 different sectors. And these are sectors not only this year, but I've actually had the insight and privilege from a young boy being in the sawmill sector to then, moving into the Canadian Wood Council and Woodworks, so really seeing kind of the government function and then being an employee of Bird Construction and running the Mass Timber Centre of Excellence, that I think that there's a pretty good understanding of really where we think that these different sectors need to go. And I have a stack of papers here specifically to the design and construction industry about making recommendations, how we're going to propel in the short term, these a successful startup. And I did spend a lot of time consulting different groups, and there were some really different messages along the spectrum of what people think the priorities are. There were some commonalities which kind of made it a bit easy, but there are some in here, and I want to hear back from you too of whether you think that these are correct or not. They may not be right now, but we have to start somewhere. So what are the recommendations for the design and construction industry to propel Canada's mass timber industry forward? Now, the sawmill sector is the next one that I'm going to focus on. And this may not pertain to you, but it's really important that you have this in your purview of understanding of really what is preventing, mass timber supply capacity from being where it needs to be to support this market growth. You kind of have to have insight into some of these challenges. The other thing is that how many people grew up in kind of a rural community where there was a sawmill in their town? Okay, maybe not so many, but sawmills generally are much of like a rural Canadian economic industry. And if you know those people, you could say, hey, I heard this and maybe you should be doing this. So that's kind of the approach there. And the last one is the federal government. Some of my best friends. We have a love-hate relationship, but what are some of the recommendations that can be done there? So these are not pretty slides. I'm supposed to be the one that's going to be entertaining you here, so hopefully I do a good job. But okay, let's start with the design and construction industry. And there had to be a bit of a framework about this when I'm asking the question, what are those 3 things that we have to do? And they're like, well, what's the objective? Well, it's how do we deliver mass timber projects in a cost-effective, sustainable way so that these are resilient and high-performing structures? How do we tick all of those boxes? And the first response that came back resoundingly was collaborative delivery. When we look at BSI and some of the educational opportunities that the entire industry needs to learn more about, it's contract models. This is the greatest challenge in public procurement. I feel our largest mass timber market, which is post-secondary, Not so much on the private developer side where they have a little bit more control, but they're apprehensive to have early involvement of key players in the industry because they're afraid that they're going to be taken advantage of from a pricing perspective. But collaborative contract delivery is critical. And there are lots of different options depending on the size of your project, the complexity of the project, the level of security clearance required to do this. And one thing that COVID has really kind of, I would say, exacerbated in a way is that rarely does a hard bid design and costing model work in today's market. So at Bird Construction, we just received substantial completion on a long-term care facility in Metagon, Nova Scotia. And at substantial completion, looking at all of the actual cost to deliver this facility was around $33 million. And then we just closed on another facility about 16 months later, and the price, it's a sister facility, the exact same thing, about 100 kilometers away, and it was $58 million. So how is that possible for us to maintain the way that we have been always doing things when our supply chains are completely changing, our trade pools and availability are changing, and everything is changing. Even the priorities around how we are delivering product today. There's so many different competing priorities, from sustainability and low carbon to, let's say, Indigenous involvement, to rapid delivery of affordable housing or long-term care facilities. So there's just that much more that involves trade partners to be brought in early and key stakeholders in the industry. This also has the ability to expedite the DFMA, Design for Manufacturing and Assembly constraints that we have. By having and leveraging the creativity of the experts of your team early on, you can then do what I like to say the transition is that you're costing for design. You're not designing and then putting out the cost. You're costing for design and you're utilizing market information. You're talking to subcontractors as you're building out the cost. Nothing against quantity surveyors. They're part of the process, certainly, on different procurement models, but it's important in some of these areas to have market-based costing. So this is the number one key recommendation if we're going to propel mass timber industry in the design and construction environment. We need to have collaborative delivery. Number two, repeatable designs. This ticks off a few other boxes when we talk about this, and not always is this even possible, especially when we look at changing our infrastructure to minimize embodied carbon impacts and so on. There is going to be a lot of retrofit, a lot of renovation that's going to be required. Repeatable designs may not necessarily be the best for that, but I still think that there is a playbook, specifically when it comes to our schools, or it comes to affordable housing, or different types of, let's say, repeatable building classifications, student residences that we are building year over year, that we can employ that consistency in design. Many of the architects that I talk to about, hey, this is what people are saying. They're like, you're going to kill me. There's going to be no point of having an architect. And my response is, no, actually, it's going to make it a little bit more challenging, and you'll become more valuable because you'll be able to find the creativity in the constraints. So how do we leverage your expertise to find that creativity? And this has the ability to totally, what I think is too slow moving is the adoption of DFMA understanding, which is on this next slide. And I'm still talking about the same thing, repeatable designs, but from a mass timber perspective, people do not know, Lee Scott and Michael here from Element 5, certainly they see plans and drawings that have like 25, 26 feet spanning CLT panels, and it's like, this doesn't really make sense from a manufacturing perspective. You spent a year going through this, you have a quantity surveyed. We're gonna have to go back through and do a redesign. So it's critical to know what the honeypots of manufacturing are, depending on where you are in Canada, if you're pursuing a mass timber project. And like I said, I think it's too slow moving. So now we need to come together as a group and find out what are some of these repeatable design solutions that we can employ in necessary infrastructure today. So these are higher level, but we have to start somewhere. Now the last one, and Ryan spoke about this morning. incentivize, maybe not necessarily incentivize, but we need to find a way to create priority for low carbon solutions. And this is something that I have taken, upon over the past year to investigate and work with different post-secondary groups and government groups, because they're coming to industry and saying, we need a plan. Maybe it's not just the implementation of LEED building classification anymore, but what do we actually do that makes sense moving forward to attract the student body, to be good environmental stewards, to be innovative? And often what I say to people is that, if you're looking at your next project as a LEED Gold classification, maybe just step back and think about carbon as the universal currency. Why don't you just build the highest performing low carbon building from both an embodied and operational perspective and target it from there, promote it from there. That's part of creating this incentive for these low carbon solutions and challenge that dogma in the industry that we need to follow these different classifications to build that high performing building. So those are the three. I know that there are many that I've left out. A lot of people would probably say, well, insurance. Insurance is the biggest issue. We have to address that. However, I am a firm believer that if you employ collaborative delivery, you will not have insurance problems. Because you will be utilizing the right manufacturers for the product. You will have an experienced team of people. I've worked pretty much the past 10 years of my life with different insurance companies, and I'm happy to say that at Bird Construction, we have pretty much a negligible increase from conventional construction to mass timber, just based on the education and early engagement that we do with our exclusive broker, AL. Okay, so that's a big statement, but that's where I think this is why this has been picked for priorities in this order. So again, this is kind of designed, this presentation, to create discussion, and please ask questions at the end, challenge me. I'd like to think that we've done our homework here, but you have to start somewhere. It's not always going to be right. So the next one is the sawmill sector. And this one may not pertain to you directly, but this is absolutely critical to the success of the mass timber industry in the short term. In Eastern North America, predominantly, we have a basket of species of wood that we use, and it's called SPF, or spruce pine fir. And it's a commodity product. 95% of our sawmill production creates this commodity product. Around 75% gets exported to the US. And the way that it works is I can't put my thing there, I can put it here, is that out of the testing that was completed, the largest testing cohort in the 1980s of this species basket, the lower 5 percentile of design values is what is carried forward for our engineers and architects to design with. And that's because we do a lot of visual grading in our sawmills. There's a knot here, there's a knot here, there's a bit of wane here, we need to remove this. We're not doing mechanically MSR, machine specification rated of our pieces to understand what is the true value and strength capability of that piece. So we are essentially selling 95% of this massive production of our precious resource into a commodity market that a lot of the time we can't control. It makes our industry susceptible to government changes in the US or any type of trade policies that can pretty much wipe out our industry overnight. So it's important for you to understand that. There is so much value that can be extracted from the way that our industry operates today. So what we have challenged, and I'm not speaking just from what people are telling me, this is actually learned experience. We approached 3 large sawmills in the province of Nova Scotia. And we said, okay, we want to look at your SPF and we want to see how strong it is and if we're capable of manufacturing mass timber in Nova Scotia. So we had, thousands and thousands of pieces. This is just a bit of a summary slide. You'll see there's only 504 there. But the published design values of density for SPF are here, 0.37, 0.38. Density is a direct correlation to strength, your modulus of elasticity, your modulus of rupture. And we found out that pretty much in every case with each of these sawmills, the density was way higher than the published value. So that means we've got really strong material that's just being wrapped up in this shitty SPF number 2 commodity product and shipped over to the US. So why not challenge your partners, go and talk to different sawmills, take a whole bunch of pieces and test them. And also what's interesting is that a lot of the design values that have been created for softwood lumber have really just been kind of focused on residential or multi-residential construction. You know, rarely are we looking at how is lumber being utilized in the flatwise orientation, which is exactly how it's oriented in CLT and glulam. So, all right, who's that person? I gotta ask you a question. I'm kidding. So these are just, again, some of the results. As you can see, the distribution of lumber that we are trying to test based on, you know, high-performing proprietary products, it's all fitting the mold. You know, there's mass timber manufacturing capability at pretty much every sawmill here in Canada. And just, again, for you to understand, you take different grades of lumber and you put them into different parts of the beam to try and meet a strength requirement. So in this case, you have a balanced beam, an unbalanced beam, you have your highest strength product on the top and bottom, which is under the most compression and tension, you know, secondary, third, and then the crap can go in the center. So you're still trying to utilize the maximum strength of the fiber where it is necessary to create the highest performing beam. That's the art of mass timber manufacturing. And really, this is where I think the future of our sawmilling industry needs to move. Because what has also happened is that we're losing touch with our market. And with the precious resources that we have on crown land or private land, it's being produced, put into this commodity basket, and we don't know where it's going. And this allows to, you know, lean the industry and, you know, make it more profitable and more affordable. This is the other, what I think is a crazy statistic, is, you know, we can all kind of become part of the solution, is the market is now here in the East. It all started in the West, but, you know, that's where a lot of the mass timber manufacturing capacity came from, is because they have Douglas fir and southern yellow pine, which are perceived as, well, not perceived, it's proven, that they are the highest strength species. So that's kind of where it originated. And now we've got great groups like, you know, Element 5 and Nordic and Art Massif out of Quebec that are utilizing our SPF products, you know, to create high-performing CLT and glulam. But this is where the market is, and our capacity is low. So if the market continues to grow and we don't have the capacity to service it, it's not going to be a very, I guess, successful industry. Yes?
Question about grading.
Mm-hmm.
As you said, it's done by no graders. So
Yes.
I understand that. What advancements are they making in mechanical grading, computer assisted grading, so that it grades each piece, maybe according to density? That's one of the indicators. Because then it could just run through, be graded, be separated, and use it, because that seems to be sort of the value.
Yeah, you nailed it. So there's quite a few companies out there. I recently did a tour through some of the largest mass timber manufacturers in Europe, and they all had this equipment. The product supplier is called Microtech, and they can literally do, in a fraction of a second, measure your density, your slope of grain. They can do very quick tension analysis, compression analysis, your MOE, MOR. They can give you, you know, pretty much everything that you need to understand as to whether, you know, that piece of wood is going to go on the top of a glulam beam or in the center. So it takes out all of the guessing and statistics in identifying the strength of that piece. They're very expensive, but they work. Yes?
Okay, so the market balance chart, is that where we are today, or is it projected for 5-10 years now?
Yeah, sorry, I should have had a citation there, but this is from the Forest Economic Advisors report, and this was in July of last year. So I would say that even more you're seeing an imbalance in capacity and market growth here in Eastern North America. But one thing I want to say, and maybe it's in the next slide, again, this is my first time giving this presentation, but if I were to say, what do you think the capacity is of the mass timber industry in Canada right now? If I were to say that, do you think that the capacity of these plants are operating at 80%? Raise your hand if you agree. 40%. Oh, wow, okay. From what I discern, it's probably around 60% capacity. Can anyone tell me why? Okay, Lee, you're excluded from this. Anyone just take a shot? Like, yeah, that's pretty much the answer. Is that the way the industry is structured in Canada is that it's on the mass timber manufacturers to take each project, pretty much do the design review, all of the detailing required, turn it into the shop drawings to run through their plant. It's not set up like the European market where these plants were probably 20 times the size of Element 5 and they only had 4 people on their engineering and detailing staff because their market was coming at them with finished projects. So a lot of the residential industry and everything like that, they had modeling capabilities, they had CNC machines, they knew exactly how to communicate to a mass timber manufacturer so that they could do what they do best and run their machine. But here, we're doing everything. It's way less efficient, so it's very difficult for us to have that capacity, run our plants at capacity, when we're spending a third of our budgets on hiring people to just try and get the projects at the right stage to feed our plant. So that, again, is where DFMA and repeatable designs are absolutely critical to maximizing the capacity in our industry. Okay, federal government. I think I'm doing okay for time. Yeah, these ones are a lot of fun. I do work closely with the different groups, and like I said, it's a bit of a love-hate relationship, but we really have to recalibrate the amount of money that is supported in different forestry agencies and different groups across Canada now, with where we're at and with the potential that we have for mass timber as we try and race to net zero by 2050. So I'm just going to show you a snapshot. Yes, these are all very critical groups to where the industry was, and I'm friends with the majority of them, and I would hate to see any types of jobs be relocated. And yes, they're working a lot on the bioeconomy and how can we take the waste products and put them into mainstream, which is absolutely critical because every time you saw a piece of wood, 50% of it turns into waste and 50% goes into the products that we use in our homes and hopefully mass timber products. But a lot of these are based around market access. Why are we maintaining a market in China for our wood in Japan when we have no capacity here in Canada for mass timber feedstock, specifically in Eastern Canada? So we just have to do a bit of a recalibration, and we also have to look at a lot of this is promotion. There's not a lot of dollars and experts and support here to help manufacturers like Element 5 reach the capacity that they need. So we're continually growing these markets, increasing awareness, but how's that going to be serviced? So Natural Resources Canada has developed what's called IFIT, which is Investment in Forestry Innovation Transition. And this is supposed to help existing manufacturers or new manufacturers access capital for the challenging long road of startup costs. Number one, it's not enough money, and it comes in way too late into the effect, and actually it services companies that already exist, where I really think that these need to be newer companies to expand our geographic approach with mass timber, involve more sawmills. Wood is a regional solution. As much as we don't like it to be, it's just where people go. So we need to have more regional supply, and it's not set up correctly. The next one, again, is really just around, I've even developed the criteria of how we implement this, and I guess I don't really need to get into it, but we're trying to implement this in the next phase of IFIT funding. So as we just talked about from the sawmill side, is that we have to facilitate growth in mass timber feedstock. You had mentioned electronic grading. Why is there not just a $2 million grant program that could access, that different sawmills of different capacity could access, and just have quick meetings with different mass timber manufacturers to give them 10 to 15 times the value from the product that they're using that's going in the commodity pool? It just doesn't make sense how people aren't seeing this. That is pretty much it. This one's one of my favorites. is the detailing. So this is really what Lee and Michael would just love to have, is access to maybe George Brown College or different community college is throughout Canada, to have the credentials and capability to jump in their business, take that structural design, convert it into the fab shop drawings that they need to run their machine. Now, there currently is no program in Canada that does this. This is the biggest bottleneck in the mass timber industry. And one person I'm really close with, who has probably the most experience in mass timber of anyone I know, and he lives in BC, and he's like, did you just hear what they did? And this was a couple years ago. They implemented an office of mass timber implementation, and they hired a bunch of fat cats to sit back and look at, how are we going to get this into government? And so it's like, we have the demand. If they would have just put 2 detailers in every single mass timber manufacturer in the province, it would have meant way more to the industry. So that just goes to show how critical it is to have this level of understanding and this support for our industry to get to the capacity of where it is. They're doing it in Europe now. Why not just create a partnership? People would love to have this employability and this, really, we work through financials of different mass timber companies all the time, and these people make a lot of money. They're critical to the success of the industry. Okay, so here's my conclusion. I hope that was relevant. I hope I wasn't focusing too much on things that don't really matter to you, but it's just important to have the full purview of the industry. But, Brookfield is also very much a larger entity that invests in things and sets up different companies to invest in different things. So this is kind of why I thought it was appropriate to talk this way in the conclusion, is that, if I were to come to you with a product and I said that it sequesters carbon, it generates oxygen, it's created by solar energy, it's biodegradable, extremely strong, lightweight, affordable, high demand, code approved, it has healing properties, and it adds 10 to 15 times the value to commodity products, would you invest? I think you'd be absolutely silly not to. It certainly ticks all the boxes today. So at Bird, we've implemented this center of excellence, and just in a couple short years, it's been quite successful. We're now, we have about $825 million worth of projects under construction from Prince Edward Island to Victoria, BC, and the pipeline is astronomical. I think pretty much every single post-secondary building that has came across my desk in the past 6 months has had a major mass timber component. So that's really amazing. But the coolest part about all this is that when you take those 36 projects that we have completed since 2008 to today, that equate to around 2.2 million square feet, and you can see some of the CO2 offset benefits there. But this is my favorite one, is that it took North American forests roughly 2 hours to grow the product for those 36 buildings. So it totally is the low carbon, I would say high capacity code approved solution for the future. So thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions. No questions. Great.
So you make comments about who the design collaborative delivery. So that
Do you mind introducing yourself and just say who you are?
My name is John DeVenz, and I'm a building science engineer.
Okay.
So I was wondering, you talked about collaborative delivery, and I want to make sure I got it. Is it you do the design up front, an innovative design, and then the cost falls out after that, and then maybe you would compare it to alternatives like a concrete building? Is that kind of how they would do it when they're scoping it up front?
So from a high level, collaborative delivery is you don't even have a design, you have a budget in mind, and you have an idea of what the use of the building is. And then you award your architect, your engineer, your contractor, potentially key trade suppliers or partners that would be critical to the success of that building. And then they all together will sit down and design a project to meet that budget.
Okay. And you also used the acronym DFMA. What was that again? I missed that.
Yeah, design for manufacturing and assembly. So when you're designing a mass timber building, you're understanding the fabrication constraints of those businesses. So your structural grids will align with easy manufacturing for the companies to cost effectively supply that in your design.
Okay, great, thank you.
No problem. And this gentleman here.
Hey, Patrick, thanks for the presentation. Really informative. I'm Ryan Going, project manager at Pomerleau. I actually used to work at Bird in a former life, but I think I left before you joined.
We need project managers.
Yeah. No comment.
Are you happy?
Yes, I don't know if any of my colleagues are here, so I'll err on the safe side. I was really interested about your slide about the SPF and the strength of the laminating stock that comes from Canadian sawmills. And I guess when you look at that, it's sort of the natural conclusion would be that our mass timber structures in Canada that are being built with this material are being over-engineered, and that engineers are designing structures that are perhaps more stiff than they would expect based on the calculations going from the literature alone. Would you say that's accurate?
Well, I would say it depends on the quality of your engineer, for one. But I don't think that that's a fair comparison. This is more showing that we have the quality of lumber and it's being marketed and sold as something that is, much less than what it's capable of. So if we are to machine stress rate that material, we can then have no uncertainty in its quality and strength performance, and then locate that directly into a mass timber product to be a high performing that hopefully gets specified and designed efficiently.
Thanks.
Yeah, good question. Gentleman in the back.
Cheers. Yeah, thanks, Patrick. This was great. So this was sort of music to my ears. My name is Jeremy Clark from Simple Life Homes, and we do prefabricated panelized envelopes. That's really our focus. And we're trying to sort of stay in our lane with light frame, stick frame style approach, and potentially partner up with some of these larger mass timber suppliers and look at different building shapes and styles and things like that. But this is really the big problem that we're facing is early integration. Without early integration, we really can't be as valuable to the project as we'd like to. We've learned lots over the years. We have all sorts of ideas. And so I guess my question, sorry to cut to the chase, is I've identified one of the really challenging components to be contract structure, especially on public projects where the procurement is so rigid. We just went through this on a public project I won't name, but very close here to home. And it's been a bit of a disaster because ultimately what they want, we can't achieve without early integration. And so contract structure is something I've been digging into. CCDC 5B is basically what I've landed on. But it's hard to find examples of that working well at this scale on these types of projects. And the only other one little thing I'll say is I've been sort of streaming the DFMA thing for a long time, but I just recently heard somebody switch that around to MID, or Manufacturing Informed Design, which was they sort of presented it as, instead of us telling the architects what they need to do, we'll give them the information about how we like to work, like your example about element 5 and what makes sense in their eyes. So anyways, thanks. This was really great.
Yeah, thank you. And public procurement is the greatest challenge, but I feel that through the feedback from the market, like the example I gave with the long-term care facility, and there's so many more that happen every month where the budget is just not being controlled. And there's really no way you're designing in a silo and you're putting out to a market that has completely changed. So I think that this feedback in delay of necessary projects that we need that are expected from the public and taxpayers, it's opening people's eyes. But if there is one thing that you can do, that you can take away, I think, from this conference is just go and learn about some of these contract models and how they can benefit you on your projects. Because I would say right now, as a large general contractor across the country that does, 2.5 billion in revenue a year, that we have now completely shifted our focus of which projects we even bid, and rarely are we even going after hard bid projects anymore. Unless you have a short list of 2 companies where you have a 50% chance to go at it and then fight with the client after. It's not good on people. It's not good for clients. It's not a good process for anyone. So everything's changing, and it's nice to hear from a manufacturer's perspective that it rings true. Jacob, if we're ever running over time, you can tell me to cut it off, but we're good? Great.
Thanks, Patrick. You mentioned that you have an avenue into the government. How can we influence what the government is doing so that there is, it is the timber product is flowing through the code requirements?
So the timber product is flowing through the code requirements.
So in terms of, your approved designs, timber is not currently called out in some, for, I'm thinking of acoustic purposes, it's not called out as a deemed to satisfy product. So how can we get it in the supply chain so that it's more readily accessible to everyone?
Yeah, like I would say that is one of the harder challenges, and it's through NRC right now where they're doing a whole bunch of different acoustic testing of different assemblies, and ultimately what governs design in mass timber is vibration, and that in turn can translate into poor acoustics, and it really is a bit of a black box to me. I'm like, well, let's mock this up and let me jump and like put a device down there that can measure it. But really, that's really what it comes down to. I'm sorry for all the engineers in the room. Yeah, and there's amazing suppliers here. Plytech is here as well. And really, it's going to come down to just early communication with the client and the AHJ to identify these assemblies, show any testing that has been done on the assembly that you're proven, and it has to be more of that alternate compliance path in this short term. But in the meantime, it's a slow triple head. It's like the elephant in the china shop for the federal government and NRC to make any of these changes, and they're trying. I can give you a contact and you can move, but I'm more focused on embodied carbon being in the next code than necessarily some of these technical changes. Yeah, it is. It's all related for sure. Yes, sir.
Hi. I just wanted to ask about the last slide you showed, the 2 hours of forest growth to supply your projects for the year, which is really exciting. I was wondering, so in terms of sustainable management of forests, that's obviously another key piece that we didn't touch on too much today, but do we as a country have the capacity for that kind of sustainable management of our forests, or is that another thing that we need to work on building as we build our capacity?
So Canada has around 136 million square hectares of certified forests, which is just a little bit below, I think, the USA for the largest portion of certified forests in the world. So we are, certainly one of the leaders. And I think I want to recalibrate that question. I think it's more about educating the industry on what is a sustainable forest rather than people saying, do you have FSC certification? Because the way that a lot of our crown land or governed land out there is that it meets a CSA standard, which very much is, I think as good, if not better, than FSC in certain ways, because it's much easier to achieve. It achieves the same regrowth rate. It doesn't have the complexity of the chain of custody that FSC does to manage the streams moving through, the different processing stages. So yeah, we have that. We are very much a forestry-based economy. It's a massive contributor to GDP. And these are things that provinces and the federal government are, some of the best in the world at. In fact, we're now looking at, with new LiDAR technology, we can see which stands of forests are actually more prone to insect infestation, fungal decay, and loss of economic resource, which can then contribute to a forest fire risk as our climate's getting warmer. So now we're even managing well beyond the metrics that we thought were sustainable into, how do we utilize these aging stands to make sure they aren't a risk and, maximize that economic value while maintaining sustainable principles. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Okay. Thanks.
gentleman before, I think, mentioned CCDC contract types.
Yeah.
What in your experience have you had the most success with? And two, do we need a new CCDC type for some kind of an early collaboration? And does CCDC 30 fit that bill? And finally, maybe you could just finally elaborate on how early involvement and collaboration affects insurance, because maybe I was under the wrong impression that the insurance costs are based on the perceived combustibility of the material, as well as it's how we repair it after a fire.
Do you have another question in there? Okay. So the CCDC contract that I think is the most effective is modified design build. And the number of that is, I think it's 2023, CCDC 20. Anyone know it? 14. Okay, yeah, there we go. And the reason why is you just have to look from an evidence-based perspective. Defense Construction Canada, our most sophisticated procurement construction group in Canada, has been utilizing modified design build for the past 10 years. And they're the ones that consistently deliver projects on time and on money, unless it's a shipbuilding group, but we won't go there. So yeah, IPD, the one that you had mentioned, the other one. IPD, I think, it's getting better. It's still a learning curve. Integrated project delivery, for those that aren't aware. And I think it's really good if you have multiple projects or you have a really complex project. Even though we are doing it for wastewater treatment plants that have a budget of $5 million. But the challenge with IPD is that sometimes these big rooms that you create early in the process to extract the magic and creativity from everyone, you can have some loud voices in there and a lot of people, and it can kind of stifle the progress of taking that next step. That's just my perspective. But yes, it's very effective. It just depends. Like, I don't think there's any silver bullet in this case. It's just really matching who the client is, what are the project parameters, where is it located, and yeah, what is the best contract model to do that. Your next one was on insurance and how collaborative delivery. So Aon, I'll promote them shamelessly because that's who I work with. They're our exclusive broker at Bird, and they are even developing insurance breaks. Element 5, you can listen to this too, is that if they are insuring the manufacturing facility and then they're insuring the building, so they know that the product that is being made is meeting, the compliance and it's done under the right standards, it's a safe facility, and that's, it's sequenced properly and right moisture management, and it goes to the building, that there can be like 25 to 30% reduction in insurance premiums for the owner. I can't really comment on that because I've had my blinders on. I've just been courting them. And recently what they've employed is something called 96 questions. And they've had all of the apprehension of the insurance industry across their diverse groups about what are the things that we have to address to make mass timber align with us. And the other critical part about this is that the insurance industry is now being pushed away from high-emitting industries like oil and gas, right or wrong. But where are they going to make that up? So they have to be more receptive and progressive to greener industries to, make up lost market share. So yeah, they did this 96 question thing, and it was supposed to be implemented last August. We haven't really gone for anything. This August. We haven't got anything in the past 6 days, so I need to talk to them about that. But it's going to be much more competitive than you'll see out there.
Is construction insurance or occupancy?
It's a bit of both. Occupancy insurance is still part of a challenge. Again, this is where I think that those repeatable solutions about consolidating wet areas and multi-residential buildings and knowing what are the right assemblies to prevent structural degradation in the event of a dishwasher leaking or something like that. We have to get there, but these are more for course of construction.
Patrick, we can take one more question and we'll have one more question.
Who's got the stinger? Stephen, you must have a real barn burner, do you? Great. Well, thanks for the awesome questions and your time and attention, everyone. Really appreciate it.